Information technology, or IT for short, has transformed the way we live our lives in today's society. It affects how we communicate with one another. It affects how we interact with material objects. But as it turns out, IT has the most impact on the decisions that we make. Through IT, we have gained far greater access to the information that is readily available through the internet. Sometimes it's the good information or it's the bad kind of information. But as it turns out, these type of information affects the decisions that we make. As human beings, we are programmed to make rational decisions and smart decisions. But as it turns out, we also make irrational decisions and illogical choices.
Okay.
What is coherent arbitrariness? Well, to first explain it, I'll have to give you an example. Now, let's say we invite a large group of people into a room, and I ask each individual in that room what's their last 2 digits on their social security number. And then I'll ask them to convert that number to a dollar amount. Then I'll ask them what interests them, what they would like to purchase with that money. And then I'll bring out an auction, and I'll bring out every single item that interests them. Now, as it turns out, that the people who have a higher digits and higher dollar amount will purchase the most amount of items. In other words, they'll spend the most amount of money compared to people who made low purchases. Well, what is coherent arbitrariness? Well, to first explain it, I'll have to give you an example. Now, let's take a look at credit cards. Credit cards are great tools for spending money without having cash on hand. And with mobile phones, we can have digital credit cards. And as a result, we no longer need those hard copies of credit cards. I will explain this conundrum by first examining the concept of coherent arbitrariness. Now you're in a restaurant and there's 2 types of people that's in the restaurant. One type has cash on hand and the other has a credit card. Now the person with the credit card will tend to pay more for the food that he consumes compared to the person with cash on hand. This is because the person with the cash in his wallet visually sees that money being taken away. This behavior goes against our rationale because a rational person will tend to make the same decision. That person will pay the same regardless if he has cash on hand or credit. To put it simply, coherent arbitrariness is the idea that outside factors influence the first decisions that we make, and as a result, it creates a habitual sequence of irrational choices. Now my colleague will further explain more of this irrational concept.
So, how else does IT instrumental ways influence our actions in everyday life? Let's say I asked you to download an internet browser, and I only gave you 2 options, Internet Browser A and Internet Browser B. I messed it up. Now, both of these browsers can acquire the same exact task, but let's say Internet Browser A comes with a antivirus installed. So, Internet Browser B does come with an antivirus, but that antivirus needs to be downloaded and installed, meaning you have to go through a multitude of steps in order to install the antivirus. The majority of users will undoubtedly go with Internet Browser A. Why, you may ask? Because it requires less effort and is much easier to install. Humans tend to go for the easier choices rather than exert the mental energy needed to make another decision. This phenomenon is called the power of the default. The power of the default is a good example of how IT influences our self-interest because it makes the default choices handed to us much harder to resist. It unknowingly shapes our choices by giving us the path to take the option of least resistance, which in most cases, we do. This irrational behavior is further enforced by the fact that we believe that we are making these decisions by ourselves. If someone else were to decide for us, then our overall performance and appeal would drastically decrease and suffer. We believe we made this call all on our own, and thus this causes our attraction to the defaulted decision to become much more deeper. My fellow classmate will continue to touch on the different ways instrumented technology influences our rational self-interest.
Here is an example of how IT further influences our actions. I think $3 is a small amount, right? But if I buy a muffin for $3, I did not have to bake or make breakfast or do any extra work. The time I save is somehow worth more than $3. Say your friend asks you for a favor. Your performance will remain stable if given the option of a muffin, but will lack if given the option of $3. Due to the replacement of social motivation, Offers in kind outsize the influence of cash despite being identical value. Another example we can think about is, say you go to the store and they say for 50 cents more you can get the bigger cup. But see, the bigger cup only costs them about 4 cents more than the smaller. You think you're getting a deal, but in actuality, they are really making more money. People are also conditioned to buy bigger so that the smaller size items will never seem like enough. In closing, IT heavily influences our rational self-interest in multiple ways, whether it is by coherent arbitrariness or the power of the default. Ready? We are unconsciously and impulsively making irrational decisions in our day-to-day lives. And then it's over.